Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode number 15 of the Vultures Row podcast. I am your host, Joey Bonsanti. Things look a little bit different today. No Tony, no Pat, but I do have a guest to introduce here. I would like to introduce you to the man who you probably know from ESPN, where he brings the facts, he brings the trivia. He's a content producer, research extraordinaire, the king of numbers. Give it up for the one, the only, Paul Hembekides, better known as Hembo. Hembo, my friend, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I appreciate the kind introduction. As you were doing all of that soliloquy, I thought to myself, I probably should have come and ambushed you with a trivia question, but I suppose since this is your home turf, that might not have been so hospitable. So I'll pass on that for now. But if there are any future episodes, I just want to warn you in advance that I'm not always so kind. So I might spring something on you the next time we do this. But for now, we'll have a lot of fun talking ball today.
I was a little, I'm not going to lie, I was a little scared. I didn't want to mention it before we were talking on the phone. I didn't even want to put myself in that sphere. So, yes, like as the title says, we are doing a deep dive into Justin Fields today. Really looking forward to this. And I literally could not think of a better person to do it with than Hembo because, like I said, he has all the stats in his back pocket. So let's just dive right into it. I have a ton of questions on Fields here. I wanted to kind of start with his decision making, his game as a passer. How do you feel like is his cap of improved decision making, his like as a pure passer, has he capped that at this point in his career, or is there room to grow with the Jets in this new offense with Tanner Entrim?
Sure, I think there's certainly plenty of room to grow. How much growing he does, I think, is up to at least somewhat uncertainty because that's not nearly the biggest reason why you choose Justin Fields to be your quarterback. If he's we'll call it an average processor, an average decision making, an average operator of the offense, you'll take it because the legs are so elite and he's such a floor raiser in the run game from that perspective. I was actually somewhat encouraged by his performance last season in Pittsburgh because he demonstrated a lot of growth in meaningful ways. His sack rate went down. The offense was a lot more methodical. He was not nearly as turnover prone. And these are areas in which the Bears obviously had concerns enough that they decided to move on from him in draft Caleb Williams, who in some ways wasn't even any better than Justin Fields was in that same offense. And so I think Caleb Williams' rookie performance combined with the way that Fields looked in the first half of last season in Pittsburgh should actually make you feel fairly good about where his head is at. Do I ever think that he's going to be an 80th percentile decision maker? I do not. I definitively do not. But I also don't think that's fair to ask when considering the other strengths that he has. What the Jets very clearly and obviously need to do from where I sit is ensure that the decision making sort of bar that he has to clear is considerably lower than you might ask an average or normal quarterback because you know that he can do so much creation on his own because he's a plus runner in the context of that offense coupled with Brees Hall, and all of a sudden you got yourself something. So I think it's a very reasonable question to ask. But if I'm a fan of the Jets, I'm not going to be all that greedy and all of a sudden expect or even want him to be Drew Brees. I merely need him to be average because we know the tools are so loud that if he can merely be average, everything else is going to really play up.
Yeah, and I think as Jets fans, we're not expecting him to even touch close. And if he is, then problem solved. We have our quarterback. We'll just pay him and we'll move on. We don't have to worry about it. But like you said, those are great points, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
really interested to see how he improves on this roster with this team. I kind of want to turn over to the turnover side of things. You know, you look at where he stands now. He's a 45 touchdown to 31 interception ratio. He has 44 total fumbles. Those aren't all lost. Is this more of bad decision making on his end with the turnovers? Is it a lot of just on the running side of the ball with the fumbles, or is it kind of a mix of both? How do you feel when you look at everything?
So it might surprise you to learn that with Justin Fields as their starter, the Steelers scored touchdowns at a higher rate in the red zone, which is obviously a big component of offense. But what you asked about specifically is the turnover, and they turned it over less frequently when Justin Fields was their starting quarterback. So let's think about this for a second. Justin Fields, 10 or 12 years younger than Russell Wilson, obviously a player who has this reputation as being, at best, an average decision maker. And the Pittsburgh Steelers were more shrewd with the football from that standpoint when he played quarterback for them last year. And that indicates to me that his operation of that offense was such that he was actually able to learn a great deal year over year. The reason they wound up going with Russell Wilson, in my opinion, nefariously, is because Russell Wilson obviously provides you a higher ceiling when it comes to downfield pass game and some explosivity in that regard. but they sacrificed other attributes of the offense. And what Justin Fields demonstrated last year, and what Justin Fields demonstrated in 2 years at Ohio State, is that he can be elite or at least close to it in the world of turnover prevention. I think that's very possible. Justin Fields is not a very intercepty quarterback, for lack of a better term. The turnovers you're most worried about with Justin Fields are the fumbles, which you mentioned, because obviously he is so prone to using his legs. That to me is the number that's far more important. I think touchdown to interception ratio, as a general rule, is kind of a dumb guy stat, truthfully. But I think fumbles is a better proxy for how effectively a quarterback hangs onto the football and makes decisions within the context of the pocket, which to me is a much more indicative of measure of how you're processing the game, of course. And Justin Fields, in my judgment, is, we'll call it an average quarterback from the pocket, if that. But Justin Fields demonstrated last year that he wasn't interception prone and curbed back his fumble issues. And so, yes, I think turnover avoidance is going to be a fairly significant component of the Jets offense this year, because it's going to be a run first offense that's not going to be terribly explosive, at least you wouldn't expect in the passing game, and you couple it with a defense that's probably going to have to carry the team. If you're going to be a playoff team, it's going to be on the back of its run game and its defense. So I do think it's the right question to ask. But what Justin Fields demonstrated to me last year was that he's actually making a good bit of growth in that area. And if he can take that improved decision making from the perspective of his interceptions and couple that with the explosivity of the legs, well, all of a sudden I think what you have is at minimum a league average starting quarterback, which in my judgment is very much at least on the list of options.
Awesome. That's music to our ears. I'll give you a breather there. From a
I'm a fan. I'm a fan. Like as a from 30,000 feet, the elevator pitches. I'm a fan. I always have been, and I think he's an especially good fit in New York, given the fact that they want to play a certain way. He can definitely major in the things that they should want to major in offensively.
Yeah, I think you go from a guy like, Rodgers, that's a whole nother story, and I'm not opening that can of worms, to a guy that just got benched and he was undefeated with the Steelers, has a chip on his shoulder, kind of looking for that almost resurgence. It's a really good opportunity, I think, for him and the Jets organization as a whole.
There's no question that it's a best of both worlds for both parties. It's a fairly low risk proposition for the Jets, because even though they guaranteed him a good bit of money, but from the perspective of how much you have to pay starting quarterbacks that aren't on rookie contracts, it is a drop in the bucket. From his perspective, this is probably going to be his last best chance of proving that he is an NFL starter, right? Because you go from Chicago, where they moved on from you, to Pittsburgh, where they basically benched you midseason, and we can argue till we're blue in the face as to whether or not that was justifiable. But he and the Jets are, at least in theory, at least on paper, a right marriage. And I have long felt, and this is a little bit soapboxy, but I have long felt that the Jets, much like other teams that play in conditions like the Jets play in, namely the Giants, are chasing the wrong things when it comes to identifying quarterbacks. In that stadium, with the way that wind whips and the fact that you're playing an AFC East schedule, Justin Fields is the exact kind of quarterback that is worth putting under center, because he's big bodied, he can enable you to major in the run game, and he's tough enough to be able to withstand a 17 game season in the Northeast. What you don't want in that context is a quarterback who doesn't run or scramble effectively and who doesn't have a cannon. Justin Fields has a hose. He runs 4.4. He's 240 pounds. Justin Fields is what they look like. And for what the Jets are trying to do and the way that the Jets are trying to build this thing, that's the blueprint. That's the formula. Whether or not Justin Fields can check enough boxes obviously remains to be seen. And I think there's a non-zero chance that halfway through the season we view this as a disaster. But I think there's an even more likely chance that Justin Fields reminds us, yeah, I'm pretty toolsy, and if the offensive coordinator is not stubborn enough as to just do his stuff and actually prioritize the things that Justin Fields has shown he's actually above average in, and there are any number of those that we've seen across his career so far, I think the Jets can have a league average offense, at least, if not slightly better, so long as the offensive line can hold up and remain healthy.
Absolutely. Probably, arguably, one of the best offensive lines that he's going to play with in his career so far. So,
It's the best
looking
one.
forward to
It's the
that.
best one he's played behind. I don't think there's that much debate about that, but it's also more indicative of where he's come from. Not necessarily suggesting that this is a group of five Hall of Famers in front of him. These aren't the Hogs from the 80s, right? But he's coming from a place where the Steelers' offensive line and the Bears' offensive lines were wretched. And I think he acquitted himself fairly well last year, despite the fact that he was not terribly well protected.
I agree. All right. So, from a statistical standpoint, how would you evaluate Fields' progression, I guess, as a whole, more like a year over year? Has there been meaningful development in your eyes thus far?
Yes, there definitely has been. His rookie season was a disaster. Everyone knows it, but most quarterbacks in that environment would have very likely had a disastrous rookie season. It isn't to excuse the poor play. It is, however, to contextualize exactly what we saw. He had very little chance to succeed, and he failed to. We get it. We all get it. What I've seen from Justin Fields, I would say most encouragingly, is last year with the Steelers, we saw him improve in small ways that really add up. And over the course of a player's 20s, that's what you have to do when you're not starting from a place where you're like Joe Burrow, or we'll call it Jaden Daniels, generational top 5 pick who has such a great starter kit that everything has to go wrong in order for you to fail. No, a lot of things have to go right in order for Justin Fields to succeed. And the turnover avoidance improving, the sack avoidance, even more importantly, improving, and candidly, the fact that he was somewhat methodical in the context of that offense and completed a higher percentage of his passes, whether you account for the average distance of target or not, is to me very encouraging. But let's not lose the sight of the fact of what makes him so great if he's operating at his best. What I looked up for you was during Justin Fields' time as a starter. So this is since 2022. I looked up most team rushing yards per game by starting quarterback during that span. So very simply, on a per game basis, how prolific was your run game? And I sorted by starting quarterback. Not surprisingly, Lamar Jackson's teams are first. The Ravens average 170 yards a game on the ground when he starts for them. Justin Fields is second. Justin Fields' offense has averaged 160 yards a game rushing in his starts. Jalen Hurts is third at 157. So what that tells me, and what that tells all of us, is that Justin Fields, as your starting quarterback, provides you a floor of having something like a top 5 run game. Literally a top 5 run game. And if you can couple that with a complimentary roster, which the Jets are, of course, aiming to do, all of a sudden you've really got something here. I can take it a little bit further for you. So the average yards per carry, the rushing average is 4.9 in games in which he started, which is half a yard better than the NFL average over that span. And over the course of 25 carries, that obviously really adds up. And perhaps most importantly, the percentage of runs that go for 10 plus, these are explosive runs, is 14%. League average across that time is 11%. Being explosive in your run game, as we learned from the Eagles last year, is super important. And Justin Fields has demonstrated that he provides you that opportunity to do it. And so I understand all the context behind your questions. You're asking the right ones. But sometimes the best thing to do is not figure out, all right, what are the best ways in which this player can unlikely improve? The best things to do or reinforce, okay, this is what I'm absolutely great at. My offense is going to average 150 a game on the ground with me as the starting quarterback. So let's go something like 60-40 if we can manage to do that. Run the ball a good amount on early downs. Open it up to 3rd and 4 instead of 3rd and 8, which is super important. And he's also shown, Joey, as you well know, that he excels out of the shotgun. We don't want him under center. We don't want him operating play action with any high degree of volume. That's not what they're going to be great doing. So what Justin Fields is great at is running the ball in the designed run, setting up dropbacks against man coverage where he can scramble if his first or second read is there, and then allow him to operate from the shotgun so that he can see the entire field because we know that's how he prefers to process the game. Enough of these things add up where you combine with his already excellent connection with Garrett Wilson from having 2 years, of course, together at Ohio State. There are enough building blocks in place. But what we need to avoid, of course, if you're the Jets, is try to square peg, round hole this thing where you want Justin Fields to be a different human being than he is. Let's amplify the strengths and minimize the weakness. Let's not try to improve the weaknesses and decide, like, if he can't do these things that I prioritize, then we can't have him. No, what you should do is aim to have an average offense on the back of his legs, major in Breece Hall, major in Garrett Wilson, and do the things that Justin Fields to date has shown he can do. And if he improves in other meaningful ways, all of a sudden, maybe you're approaching top 10 rather than league average.
Yeah, that would be best case, and I think that's a lot of hope. With my light just went out here. Let's turn that back on. But I think that's most of the hope with the fan base now is we have this offensive line. We're hoping that we could just run the hell out of the ball, almost kind of reminiscent of that 09, 010 era with the Jets last time they went back to an AFC championship game. They were ground and pounded again. This is the new NFL. We know that teams don't usually run it down their teams' throats, but with the way this is set up with Justin Fields at quarterback, I really do feel like that's going to be the blueprint for this offense moving forward.
I want to push back just a little bit because I think the
Sure.
notion that the new NFL is super pass happy, while obviously true, doesn't necessarily mean you can't win in other ways. The Eagles might be a bad example, the Super Bowl champions from last year, my favorite team, full disclosure, because that's a stacked roster. They're loaded. They can beat you however they want to beat you. But the reason why I feel the Jets might actually be operating with a pretty shrewd market inefficiency here is because over the course of so much time, because the NFL has operated the way that you just described so articulately, is that you've decided to major in dime and nickel, and that means you're not drafting nearly as many big people. And if you're not drafting nearly as many big people, and you're not either loading the box or don't have willing and able corners and safeties that can come up and tackle, you can average 5 yards a carry. And if you can average 5 yards a carry, you can nearly split your play sheet in half and run it half the time or almost half the time. And there's so much value in that because it's so low risk. And if you're going to create an explosive run 15% of the time, that's your blueprint. And that's an extremely valuable component of any offense. And it would be one thing if Justin Fields merely had an average arm from the perspective of him being able to chuck the ball down the field. We know he can hum it. Like Justin Fields has a cannon. We've seen that throughout the course of his career. I mean, he can really throw the ball. I thought his game against Clemson in the college football playoff national semifinal was one of the best big games I've seen a college quarterback play in recent years. And he was humming the ball down the field. And in this environment at MetLife Stadium where that wind whips, ask Eli Manning, ask anyone who's ever played there, you have to be able to spin the ball and almost enable that natural carry to drive down the field. And Justin Fields can do that. So the number that you need to be watching this season when it comes to Justin Fields output from a passing standpoint is not completion percentage, is not yards per attempt. It's yards per completion. How much damage are you doing on the throws that actually hit? I much prefer that as a measure. Think about Cam Newton in his heyday with the Panthers. Super inaccurate, super rough as a passer, far from being efficient. But if you're averaging 14, 15 yards per completion, you don't necessarily need to be able to 3 yards in a cloud of dust because you can pick up chunks. The Jets are going to be a chunk passing offense, and they're going to be a methodical run offense, and everything else in between merely needs to creep towards average for the offense to dream on. That's kind of where I see this Jets team, but they can sort of prey upon an NFL that doesn't major in a lot of 4-3, doesn't major in a lot of 7-man boxes, doesn't major in a lot of that stuff, like the preventative run defenses. And so let's create issues where they have to force our too high safeties to move down and our corners to be aware of the run game, of course. And then once you've created that illusion, that's when you're going to have to use Justin Fields' arm strength to your advantage and target Garrett Wilson down 15, 17, 19 yards down the field and be willing to punt sometimes after going 3-and-out because you know you're taking enough risks that over the course of time, some of those throws you're going to hit on and flip the field and score points as a direct result.
Well, they don't call you Sneaky Hembo for nothing because you are coming onto this podcast and essentially just I might have to go back and redo my prediction from a couple weeks ago of a 6-11 record with the Jets. You're literally selling me on being like this is a 10-11 win team right now.
I'll split the difference. Right now, like I've gone through all the schedules as you might imagine. I have the Jets at 8-9. I
Okay.
think the Jets are a considerably better team than national consensus believes. But you really have to do a good bit of squinting to imagine them reaching the playoffs because there are still any number of obvious roster issues. And even though I'm somewhat optimistic about Justin Fields, I think his 75th percentile outcome is still something that only approximates average. Whereas in the most predictive thing year to year for any team, as you well know, is how good is your pass game going to be? Like it's the stickiest year to year predictor of success. And if I'm going to sit here and say, at best, this is a passing offense that you can project to be average, well, you have to do a lot of making up for it in the other attributes of the game, of course. The pass offense is the most important thing in the NFL these days, followed by your pass defense, followed by your run offense, followed by your run defense. And so if the Jets' best thing is the third most important thing, well, you have to be great at it, not good, and you have to be able to creep toward average in those other areas. I could see them doing it, but to me, a successful season would be one in which they're playing a meaningful game in week 17 or 18, not necessarily one in which you're on the road week 1 wild card, because that to me would be a almost best case scenario. Maybe not best case, but 90th percentile outcome type thing.
Gotcha. All right, so a couple more questions here.
Yeah.
This is a good one. How does Fields' current profile affect his future market value? I'm more looking at like, is there any big trends that suggest that he could end up like a Baker, a Geno, a Sam Darnold, where he gets that big contract? Have you seen enough from him and with the trends and everything pointing towards that direction, or is he just going to be some backup in the next couple of years, you think?
I think the likeliest scenario is somewhere in the middle, one in which the Jets are pleasantly surprised by his output this year and next. If you were to ask me whether or not he would be the Jets' starting quarterback in 2027, which of course would be beyond the current contract that they've signed him, I think the betting market would have to suggest that no is likelier than yes, but I think it's also exceedingly possible that he's the Jets' starting quarterback through the 2020s. The reason that I think I'd bet against it is merely because of what the league has said. Like the league wasn't interested in him when the Bears decided to cut him loose. I mean, if Justin Fields was still such an attractive asset, the Steelers wouldn't have to have given up nothing to get him. And if Justin Fields was such an attractive asset, A, the Steelers would likely not have benched him, and B, there would have been more than one team clamoring to sign him this offseason. And so that's what the league told us of him. But the league was also wrong and has been wrong about any number of other quarterbacks, and you mentioned three of the most obvious ones that found their footing in new environments and thrived. I think Justin Fields is likely to be a player whose name we add to that list. I also think it wouldn't stun any of us if Justin Fields is backing up as soon as next season. That's the thing. You're playing the variance game. You're playing the shot in the dark game. But this is how you would have to approach quarterback when you don't have someone in house, a franchise quarterback that you all yearn for. You have to take shots with volume. You have to take shots with specificity. And in this case, the specificity is he's great at this one thing. It's not the most important thing when it comes to quarterback play, but we can build a good offense around it. But to me, like Justin Fields' future is going to be more a reflection upon the coaching staff this year and a little bit less of a reflection upon his natural talent or God given ability because we generally know what that is. We've not yet seen him be surrounded by the right environment, coached in the right system. If the Jets get that right, I think there's a meaningful chance that he's your quarterback for the next 5 years. But that requires the coaching staff to do a good to great job. And if there's anything that I know from having watched the Jets for the last 25 years, that is something that I would not exactly bet on because the ownership, of course, remains the same.
And that is, yeah. I mean, don't have to go off anymore on that. We kind of know that, but yeah, and
Yeah, no kidding.
like you mentioned, like those guys also had fallen into really great situations. Like Darnold got O'Connell, Baker got to go down to Tampa with Cohen. So the coaching definitely plays a massive factor.
Yeah,
I'm going to move off to my last question here. It's a non-related Justin Fields one, more of like an overall defensive of Jets question for you. So the Jets ranked 17th in the run defense last year,
yeah.
14th in sacks, 7th in passing yards per game. Overall, I would say it was a lackluster defensive season due to a multitude of things. But with the coaching and scheme changes, do you see this being an improved defense overall? I kind of have them in the same spot that they were last year, which is kind of middle of the pack to lower. What would you say on that topic?
In the second quartile. So they're not going to be a top 8 defense, but I think they'll be between ninth and 16th. If you had to make me guess right now, I think the secondary's excellent, like truly excellent. I think we just saw the worst year that Sauce will ever have. I want to obviously see the pass rush improve and some of these high draft picks demonstrate that they can play on 3 downs. I don't know if we're going to see it or not. Like that's the thing that I think could definitely enable the defense to take another big step forward. But I actually like you could definitely do a lot worse than personnel wise here. Like the Jets have at minimum average, if not good personnel across the board. And I actually think Aaron Glenn does a really good job of getting more with less. He definitely did so in Detroit. It just took a while. So will it happen in year one? I would guess not. But if I told you right now that the Jets would have somewhere between the number 9 and number 16th defense in the NFL, take it or leave it. Would you take it or would you leave it?
Right now, yeah, I would take that. I
Okay.
really would.
And I
Especially
think
last year, they were in
mhm.
that middle tier. So I would take anything that's an improvement, especially coming off of what they did last year.
So if you ask me to guess right now, again, we have so much time until the season comes around and Lord knows what might still happen or what we might see. But right now the Jets are majoring in boring, which I love. I think you're going to see an offense that, a defense that ranks in the second quartile, an offense that ranks in the third. That gets you to be something like an average team. So not to be reductive in my analysis, but your season very then likely comes down to turnover luck and one score games and things that are kind of hard to predict, are kind of hard to replicate, things that, as we well know from watching 17 game NFL seasons, make or break teams. Like injury luck is a huge thing in the NFL. Like, how much depth do you have? Probably not enough to justify a bunch of atrophy or to be able to stave off a bunch of atrophy. But that's the kind of season I think the Jets are going to have. I think the Jets are going to be a team that wins between 7 and 10 games, and the range of outcomes there is, I think, dependent upon things that we just can't know. And so that's not a cop out; it's honest analysis. That's what I view. I view the defense as being slightly above, and the offense as being slightly below. And if Justin Fields is able to elevate this group at all, and the coaching staff can do a, we'll call it B plus job, this is going to be a team that at least is as good as you've watched in several years. And it might not be quite as entertaining because you're not going to be on the national shows with all sorts of drama and celebrity riffraff. But as a fan of a team that perennially loses, I'd much prefer that to the alternative.
I agree. I know we're at time here. Give me the Justin Fields total rushing yards for this season and tell me if the Eagles are going to repeat as champions in 2025.
If you told me Justin Fields is going to start 17 games, and there's no reason to say that he wouldn't, because what's the point of making such a prediction? I think he's going to rush for 1,100 yards. Like, Justin Fields is going to rush for 1,000+ yards this season because that's what he's best at. And Brees Hall is so good that I think they're going to have the best zone read combination in the division, if not the whole conference, aside from Baltimore. That's to me the number that I would be chasing if I'm Justin Fields. Can I get to 1,000 yards rushing? 1,100 is my number because I think that gets you to a place where you're like between 60 and 65 a game. I think it's very possible. And Brees is also, I think, not fragile, but someone whose workload I think they've shown they want to limit at least a little, or at least that's how I would approach this season. I think 1,000 yards for Justin Fields on the ground is on the list of options. I might look stupid, 6 months from now, but it's not likely. And the second question that you asked was, would the Eagles repeat? Will the Eagles repeat? If it's a yes/no proposition, I'll say no, merely because of the probability. But they're clearly and obviously the best team. I think that the Eagles might have a better regular season team this year than last, because so many of their standout performers last year on defense were so young, and that they're likely to improve. There's also no obvious reason for me to believe that the offense is going to take a step back. In fact, the offense was pretty lackluster for a lot of the season. So the Eagles are a wagon. They're going to win 14 or 15 games again this year. Right now, I'm kind of in my glory days when it comes to this era of Eagles football. But look, if I get what I want and you get what you want, I think we're looking at a scenario in which the Eagles are playing on Super Bowl Sunday, and who knows, maybe the Jets will sniff the playoffs as a wild card.
Yes, that's the hope. So you got 2 championships in 7 years. You got the tush push at staying. It's a great time to be Hembo. So Hembo, thank you again for jumping on the podcast. Really appreciate it. All the listeners really appreciate it. Go Jets, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks again, Hembo.
Later, friends.